Alexander Hartwell, a man whose name is synonymous with success. At just 42 years old, he's the CEO of Hartwell Industries, a multinational conglomerate that dominates sectors ranging from technology to real estate. His empire spans continents, his decisions ripple through global markets, and his wealth is measured in billions. But behind the polished veneer of power suits and boardroom victories lies a story far more complex than the headlines suggest. Alexander wasn't born into privilege. He grew up in a modest household in a small town, where his father worked as a mechanic and his mother juggled two jobs to make ends meet. From an early age, he learned the value of hard work and resilience, traits that would later define his meteoric rise to success. Alexander's personality is a fascinating blend of ambition and introspection. He's known for his sharp intellect, unrelenting drive, and ability to spot opportunities others overlook. Colleagues describe him as a visionary leader, someone who can inspire teams while maintaining an air of quiet authority. Yet, beneath the surface, there's a man who often feels like an outsider in his own world. Despite his accomplishments, Alexander carries a deep-seated loneliness. His relentless pursuit of success came at a cost. Strained relationships, missed family gatherings, and a gnawing sense of emptiness that no amount of money could fill. He's a man who has everything but struggles to find meaning beyond the numbers on a balance sheet. The sprawling metropolis of New York City, a place that perfectly mirrors Alexander's life, glittering on the outside but teeming with unseen stories beneath its surface. Hartwell Industries headquarters is a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan, its glass facade reflecting the city's ceaseless energy. It's a building that commands respect, yet it also feels impersonal, almost cold. Inside, the atmosphere buzzes with urgency. Employees rush between meetings, phones ring incessantly, and the hum of productivity fills every corner. For Alexander, this environment is both familiar and suffocating. While he thrives under pressure, he often finds himself yearning for something simpler, something real. One late evening, after a particularly grueling day of back-to-back meetings and high-stakes negotiations, Alexander decides to take a detour before heading home. Exhausted and craving a moment of solitude, he steps into the company's executive restroom, a pristine, marble-clad sanctuary tucked away on the top floor. The room is quiet, save for the faint hum of fluorescent lights above. As he washes his hands, he notices something unusual, a faint sound coming from one of the stalls. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he hesitates, unsure whether to investigate further. Little does he know, this seemingly ordinary moment will set off a chain of events that will challenge everything he thought he knew about success, love, and the true meaning of connection. Alexander stood frozen by the sink. The soft rustling from the stall grew louder, pulling him out of his thoughts. His brow furrowed in confusion. What could possibly be happening here? Against his better judgment, he stepped closer, his polished leather shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Pushing the door open just enough to peek inside, his breath caught in his throat. There, curled up on the floor beside the toilet, lay a young woman fast asleep. Her head rested against the cold tile wall, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to ward off an invisible chill. She looked no older than her mid-20s, her face pale but strikingly beautiful even in repose. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and strands of her chestnut hair clung damply to her forehead, suggesting exhaustion far beyond what sleep alone could explain. The sight was jarring, almost surreal. This wasn't some lavish penthouse or private jet. It was a corporate restroom, sterile and impersonal, the last place anyone should have found themselves seeking refuge. Alexander felt a pang of unease mixed with disbelief. Who was she? How had she ended up here? And why hadn't anyone noticed her before now? Questions raced through his mind as he took in the scene before him. Her clothes were simple yet worn, a faded hoodie draped over a pair of jeans patched at the knees, and her sneakers looked like they'd seen better days. A small backpack sat beside her, its contents spilling slightly onto the floor. A crumpled water bottle, a half-eaten granola bar, and what appeared to be a well-worn notebook. For a moment, Alexander simply stared, torn between shock and an inexplicable urge to help. The disparity between their worlds hit him like a freight train. Here he was, dressed in a tailored suit worth more than most people made in a month, standing in a space designed for luxury and convenience, while she seemed to embody struggle itself. Yet, despite her circumstances, or perhaps because of them, there was something undeniably compelling about her presence. It wasn't just her physical appearance. It was the way she carried herself, even in sleep. There was a quiet dignity in the curve of her shoulders, a resilience etched into every line of her weary body. He crouched down cautiously, careful not to startle her. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. When she didn't stir, he reached out hesitantly, gently touching her shoulder. She flinched awake instantly, her wide eyes locking onto his with a mixture of fear and confusion. For a split second, neither of them moved. Then, realizing where she was, she scrambled to sit upright, clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to. I'll leave right away." "No, wait," Alexander replied quickly, raising a hand to stop her. He didn't know why he said it, only that something about her desperation tugged at a part of him he'd long ignored. "Are you okay?" The question sounded absurd even to his own ears, given the obvious answer, but it hung in the air between them nonetheless. She hesitated, clearly debating whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded, though her expression betrayed the lie. "Yeah, I'm fine," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. But her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack, betraying her anxiety. Alexander studied her closely, noting the subtle tremor in her hands and the faint bruise peeking out from beneath her sleeve. Whatever story she carried, it was heavy. And suddenly, he realized he needed, to hear it. Not because he pitied her, but because there was something profoundly human about her vulnerability that resonated deeply within him. In that moment, the polished CEO and the mysterious stranger were no longer separated by wealth or status. They were simply two people sharing a space, connected by a fleeting yet undeniable spark of understanding. Her name was Elena Morales, though few bothered to ask. To the world, she was invisible, a blur of movement in the background, a figure who slipped in and out of rooms unnoticed. By day, she cleaned offices in Hartwell Industries' towering headquarters, her hands calloused from scrubbing floors and her knees sore from hours spent crouched over baseboards. By night, she wandered the city streets, searching for warmth in subway stations or abandoned buildings when the biting cold became unbearable. Her life was a patchwork of survival, stitched together with scraps of hope and sheer determination. Elena's journey began far from the bustling streets of New York. She grew up in a small, sun-drenched town in Mexico, where laughter echoed through cobblestone streets and family meant everything. Her childhood was filled with dreams of becoming a teacher, inspired by her mother, who ran a tiny community school. But those dreams shattered when her father fell ill, leaving the family drowning in medical debt. At 18, Elena made the heart-wrenching decision to leave home, crossing borders and enduring unimaginable hardships to send money back to her siblings. What started as temporary sacrifice turned into years of relentless struggle, each step forward clawed out of sheer necessity. Now, at 24, Elena lived on the fringes of society, carrying the weight of her sacrifices silently. Her days were long and grueling, starting before dawn and ending long after sunset. She worked tirelessly, cleaning spaces that would never reflect her labor. The pay was meager, barely enough to cover food and the occasional bus fare, let alone rent. Most nights, she sought refuge wherever she could find it, in stairwells, public parks, or, as Alexander had discovered, empty restrooms. Sleep came in stolen moments, interrupted by the constant fear of being discovered or chased away. But Elena wasn't defined solely by her hardships. Beneath her weary exterior lay a spirit that refused to break. She carried a small notebook everywhere she went, filling its pages with sketches, poems, and fragments of stories she hoped to one day share with the world. Writing was her escape, a way to hold onto pieces of herself when the world seemed determined to strip them away. Her words spoke of resilience, of finding beauty in brokenness, and of a belief that kindness still existed, even if she hadn't experienced much of it lately. When Alexander knelt beside her that night, Elena's first instinct was to retreat. Vulnerability was dangerous. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet, something in his gaze stopped her, a flicker of genuine concern that cut through her defenses. For the first time in years, someone saw her not as a burden or an inconvenience, but as a person. As she stumbled over her words, trying to explain herself, she felt an unfamiliar warmth bloom in her chest. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was reckless, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that this encounter might change something, not just for her, but for both of them. In the dim light of the restroom, Alexander found himself grappling with emotions he hadn't felt in years. The sight of Elena, so vulnerable yet resilient, stirred something deep within him. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice steady but gentle, hoping to ease her evident discomfort. "Can we talk?" Elena hesitated, her eyes darting towards the door, contemplating a quick escape. But something in Alexander's demeanor, a mix of authority softened by empathy, made her pause. Slowly, she nodded, clutching her backpack tighter as if it were a lifeline. They moved to a small lounge area adjacent to the restroom, a space rarely used by anyone other than the cleaning staff. The plush chairs and muted lighting provided a stark contrast to the sterile bathroom tiles. As they sat down, Alexander leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, genuinely interested in understanding her story. "Tell me about yourself," he urged, his tone inviting rather than intrusive. Elena's initial responses were guarded, brief answers that revealed little. However, as Alexander continued to listen without judgment, nodding occasionally and asking thoughtful follow-up questions, she gradually opened up. She spoke of her childhood in Mexico, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and the cruel twist of fate that led her to the harsh realities of New York City. Her voice wavered as she recounted nights spent in subways and the constant battle against invisibility in a city that never slept. Listening intently, Alexander felt a profound shift within himself. Here was a woman whose strength and perseverance put his own challenges into perspective. Her story wasn't just about survival. It was about maintaining dignity and hope amidst despair. He realized how insulated his life had become, surrounded by people who mirrored his success but rarely shared his struggles. "I want to help," Alexander finally said, breaking the silence that had settled after Elena's narrative. His offer was met with skepticism. "Why?" she asked bluntly, her eyes searching his for any sign of ulterior motive. "Because everyone deserves a chance to thrive, not just survive," he replied earnestly. "And because meeting you tonight has reminded me of things I've forgotten: kindness, humility, the importance of community." Their conversation stretched into the early hours of the morning, each revelation drawing them closer. Alexander learned about Elena's passion for writing, her secret dream of publishing a book someday. Inspired, he suggested she write about her experiences, offering to connect her with contacts in the publishing industry. It was a small gesture, but it ignited a spark of hope in Elena's eyes. As dawn approached, they parted ways, but not before exchanging contact information. Alexander promised to check in on her progress and explore ways to assist her further. For the first time in years, he left the office feeling a sense of purpose that transcended business achievements. Meanwhile, Elena walked away with a renewed belief in humanity's capacity for compassion, a belief she hadn't dared to entertain in a long time. This unexpected meeting marked the beginning of a transformation for both. For Alexander, it was a rediscovery of values long buried under layers of ambition. For Elena, it was a lifeline thrown unexpectedly, pulling her towards possibilities she once thought were beyond reach. Together, they embarked on a journey that neither could have anticipated, driven by a mutual desire to bridge the gap between their vastly different worlds. Weeks passed, and Alexander and Elena's bond deepened. Their conversations evolved from cautious exchanges to heartfelt discussions about dreams, fears, and the complexities of life. Alexander found himself drawn to Elena's authenticity, her unwavering optimism despite her circumstances, and the quiet strength she exuded. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not because of another lucrative deal or boardroom victory, but because of the simple joy of connecting with someone who saw him as more than a title or a bank account. Elena, too, began to let her guard down, allowing herself to trust this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. She admired his willingness to listen, his curiosity about her world, and the way he treated her with respect, even when no one else did. Their relationship shifted subtly but unmistakably. What began as a chance encounter blossomed into something neither of them could ignore. Alexander started visiting Elena during her shifts at the office, bringing coffee and snacks, sitting with her during breaks to hear about her day. Elena, in turn, shared more of her writing with him, reading aloud passages from her notebook that painted vivid pictures of her hopes and struggles. They laughed together over silly jokes, debated passionately about books and movies, and found solace in each other's company. It wasn't long before they both realized that what they felt for one another was more than friendship, it was love. But love, as they soon discovered, is rarely straightforward. One evening, as they sat together in the same lounge where they'd first spoken, Alexander decided to confess his feelings. "Elena," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I know this might sound crazy, and maybe it's too soon, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel something for you. You've changed the way I see the world, and I think I'm falling in love with you." Elena's eyes widened, surprise and emotion flickering across her face. For a moment, she was silent, processing his words. Then, with a soft smile, she reached for his hand. "Alexander," she said, her voice steady but filled with warmth, "you've been the kindest person I've ever met. You've made me believe in myself again. I think I'm falling in love with you too." Their confession brought a wave of relief and happiness, but it also marked the beginning of a new set of challenges. Alexander's world was one of privilege and expectations, while Elena's was defined by survival and invisibility. Bridging the gap between their lives wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to try. Alexander introduced Elena to his inner circle, starting with his closest confidant, Marcus, who had been his friend since college. Marcus was skeptical at first, warning Alexander about the complications of such a relationship. "Alex, I get it, you're smitten. But think about the scrutiny, the gossip. People won't understand this. Are you ready for that?" "I don't care what they think," Alexander replied firmly. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Something real." Meanwhile, Elena faced her own hurdles. Her co-workers at Hartwell Industries whispered behind her back, speculating about her sudden closeness to the CEO. Some accused her of using him for his wealth, while others dismissed her as a fleeting distraction. The judgment stung, but Elena refused to let it break her. She held her head high, focusing on the love she shared with Alexander and the opportunities he had helped her create. With his encouragement, she began submitting her writing to publishers, taking the first steps toward fulfilling her dream. Their relationship became a beacon of hope for both of them, but it also tested their resolve. Alexander's schedule remained demanding, and there were days when Elena felt overshadowed by his responsibilities. Likewise, Alexander struggled with guilt, knowing that his wealth and influence gave him advantages Elena could only dream of. Yet, through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their differences and comfort in their shared vision of a better future. Just as they began to settle into this new rhythm, however, an unforeseen twist threatened to unravel everything they had built. One afternoon, as Alexander reviewed documents in his office, his assistant handed him a file labeled "Confidential." Inside was a report detailing suspicious activity within Hartwell Industries. A whistleblower had come forward, alleging that several employees, including members of upper management, were embezzling funds. Among the names listed was Elena's supervisor, a man known for his abrasive demeanor and questionable ethics. Alexander's stomach churned as he read further. The allegations implicated Elena indirectly, claiming she had been coerced into covering up discrepancies in financial records. Though the evidence was circumstantial, the implications were damning. If the accusations proved true, Elena's reputation and their relationship would be irreparably damaged. Confronted with this shocking revelation, Alexander felt torn. On one hand, he trusted Elena implicitly, knowing her integrity and the hardships she had endured. On the other, the weight of his position demanded impartiality. He couldn't ignore the investigation, nor could he shield her from scrutiny without compromising his principles. For the first time since meeting her, He questioned whether their love could withstand the storm ahead. That evening, when Elena arrived at his office, unaware of the brewing scandal, Alexander struggled to maintain his composure. "We need to talk," he said gravely, gesturing for her to sit. As he explained the situation, her face paled and tears welled in her eyes. "I swear, Alexander, I didn't do anything wrong," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I was just trying to keep my job, to survive. Please believe me." And he did, but believing her wasn't enough. The world they inhabited was unforgiving, and the truth wouldn't be enough to protect them from the fallout. As they sat together in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them, Alexander realized that their love was about to face its greatest test, one that would force them to confront not only external forces, but also the deepest corners of their own hearts. The days that followed felt like walking through a minefield. Every step Alexander and Elena took seemed to trigger whispers, accusations, and judgmental stares. The news of the investigation spread like wildfire through Hartwell Industries, fueled by rumors that painted Elena as either a victim or a conspirator. Colleagues who once greeted her with polite nods now avoided her altogether, while others openly questioned her motives. "How convenient," one coworker muttered loud enough for her to hear, "that she just happens to be cozy with the boss." The words cut deeper than Elena expected, reopening wounds she thought she'd healed. For Alexander, the pressure mounted exponentially. Board members called emergency meetings, demanding transparency and swift action. Investors expressed concern over potential damage to the company's reputation, while media outlets began circling like vultures, eager for a scandalous headline. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, urged Alexander to distance himself from Elena until the dust settled. "It's not personal, Alex," he argued during a tense phone call. "But perception matters. If people think you're playing favorites, it'll undermine your leadership." Yet, Alexander couldn't bring himself to abandon Elena. He visited her apartment late at night, bringing groceries and updates on the investigation. Each visit was fraught with tension. Elena's usual resilience wavered under the weight of uncertainty. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "What if this ruins everything, for both of us?" "It won't," Alexander replied firmly, though doubt gnawed at him. He reached across the table, taking her trembling hands in his. "We'll get through this together. I promise." But promises, no matter how sincere, couldn't shield them from the consequences of the unfolding drama. The whistleblower, emboldened by anonymity, released additional documents to the press. These included emails allegedly sent by Elena's supervisor, instructing her to falsify records. While the messages didn't explicitly implicate Elena, they cast enough suspicion to keep her entangled in the investigation. Overnight, her name became synonymous with controversy, splashed across tabloids and social media feeds. Comment sections erupted with vitriol, accusing her of exploiting Alexander's kindness for personal gain. The backlash hit Elena hardest. Strangers recognized her on the street, pointing and jeering. Her landlord, citing tenant complaints, served her an eviction notice. Desperate, she spent nights sleeping in her car, unwilling to impose on Alexander further. Meanwhile, Alexander faced mounting criticism from all sides. Shareholders questioned his judgment, accusing him of letting emotions cloud his decision-making. Even his family weighed in, with his sister calling to chastise him for jeopardizing the family legacy. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to Mom and Dad?" she demanded. They're mortified. Despite the chaos, moments of clarity emerged. One afternoon, as Alexander sifted through legal briefs in his office, Elena appeared unannounced. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice carried a quiet resolve. "I need to tell you something," she said, closing the door behind her. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to a page filled with handwritten notes. "These are the dates and details of every interaction I had with my supervisor. I wrote them down because I knew something wasn't right. If it helps prove my innocence, use them." Alexander stared at her, overwhelmed by her courage. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I did," she replied, her chin lifting defiantly. "Because I refuse to let anyone destroy what we've built, not without a fight." Their determination paid off. With Elena's documentation and Alexander's resources, investigators uncovered evidence proving her supervisor's guilt. The man had manipulated multiple employees, including Elena, coercing them into covering up his crimes. When the truth came to light, the tide began to turn. Public opinion shifted, with many praising Elena's bravery and condemning the toxic culture that had enabled the fraud. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. The ordeal left scars neither could easily forget. Elena struggled to trust others, haunted by memories of betrayal and judgment. Alexander, too, bore the emotional toll, questioning whether his position of power had inadvertently placed her in harm's way. One evening, as they sat together on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, Elena broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if things would have been different if we'd met somewhere else? Somewhere simpler?" Alexander sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Maybe, but then I think about how meeting you changed me. You reminded me of what really matters: kindness, honesty, love. No matter where we met, I'd still choose you." His words brought tears to her eyes. But this time, they weren't born of pain. They were tears of gratitude, of hope. Together, they had weathered the storm, emerging stronger, not because they were unscathed, but because they had chosen to stand by each other when the world tried to tear them apart. The aftermath of the scandal lingered like a shadow, but it also became the foundation for something stronger, a bond forged not just by love, but by shared resilience and growth. For Alexander, the experience forced him to reevaluate his priorities. He realized that his relentless pursuit of success had isolated him from the very things that made life meaningful: connection, vulnerability, and the simple joys of being present. Inspired by Elena's unwavering spirit, he began making changes, not just in his personal life, but within Hartwell Industries as well. One of his first actions was to overhaul the company's workplace culture. He implemented stricter anti-harassment policies, ensured fair wages for all employees, and created support systems for those facing hardship. "No one should have to endure what Elena went through," he declared during an all-staff meeting. "From now on, this company will stand for more than profit. It will stand for people." His words earned him both admiration and skepticism, but over time, the sincerity of his efforts shone through. Employees who had once viewed him as untouchable began to see him as approachable, even relatable. Elena, too, underwent a transformation. With the charges against her dropped and her supervisor sentenced for his crimes, she reclaimed her dignity and pursued her dreams with renewed vigor. Alexander encouraged her to enroll in a local community college, where she excelled in creative writing courses. Her professors praised her raw talent and unique perspective, urging her to submit her work to literary journals. Within months, her essays and short stories began appearing in publications, earning her recognition as a rising voice in contemporary literature. Their relationship deepened as they navigated these changes together. Alexander attended Elena's readings, beaming with pride as audiences applauded her words. In return, Elena accompanied him to charity events and business conferences, offering insights that challenged his traditional thinking. They balanced each other in ways neither had anticipated, creating a partnership rooted in mutual respect and admiration. A pivotal moment came when Alexander invited Elena to join him on a trip to Mexico. It was her first time returning home in nearly a decade, and the visit was bittersweet. She introduced him to her family, explaining their journey and the sacrifices they had made. Her parents embraced Alexander warmly, thanking him for supporting their daughter. Over meals shared under starlit skies, Alexander listened to stories of Elena's childhood, the laughter, the dreams, the love that had shaped her. He saw glimpses of the girl she once was and understood more fully the woman she had become. Back in New York, they celebrated milestones big and small. When Elena received an acceptance letter from a prestigious writing fellowship, Alexander surprised her with a celebratory dinner at her favorite restaurant. "You deserve this," he told her, raising his glass in a toast. And so much more. Later that year, they moved into a cozy apartment together, blending their worlds in a space that reflected both their personalities. Books lined the shelves, alongside photographs of their travels and mementos from Elena's past. As their lives intertwined, they discovered the true meaning of family, not defined by bloodlines, but by the bonds we choose to nurture. Alexander introduced Elena to his parents, who initially harbored reservations about their son's unconventional relationship. But over time, they grew fond of her, charmed by her wit and warmth. Similarly, Elena's siblings adored Alexander, teasing him good-naturedly about his lack of cooking skills. Together, they formed a blended family united by love and acceptance. Looking back, Alexander marveled at how far they had come. "I used to think success was about climbing higher, acquiring more," he confessed one evening as they watched the sunset from their balcony. "But now I know it's about finding peace, with yourself, with others, with life." Elena smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And sometimes," she added softly, "it's about finding someone who sees you when no one else does." Their story became a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and second chances. Through their journey, they taught others that love isn't confined by circumstance or status. It's a choice, a commitment to stand by someone even when the world tries to pull you apart. And in doing so, they reminded everyone who crossed their path that the most extraordinary connections often begin in the most unexpected places. Alexander and Elena's story unfolds. It leaves behind a tapestry of lessons woven with threads of kindness, resilience, and the transformative power of love. Their journey reminds us that true success isn't measured by wealth or titles, but by the depth of our connections and the impact we have on others. Alexander's evolution from a man consumed by ambition to someone grounded in empathy underscores the importance of self-reflection and growth. His willingness to step outside his comfort zone, to see Elena not as a stranger or a statistic, but as a person worthy of compassion, challenges us to do the same in our own lives. Elena's story serves as a powerful reminder of the strength found in vulnerability. Her courage to share her struggles, to fight for her truth, and to pursue her dreams despite countless obstacles inspires us to embrace our own battles with grace and determination. She teaches us that resilience isn't about avoiding pain, but about rising stronger after every fall. Together, their relationship exemplifies how love can transcend barriers, bridging divides of class, circumstance, and misunderstanding. At its core, their tale is a celebration of family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we create through acts of kindness and shared experiences. Whether it's the support of loved ones, the camaraderie of colleagues, or the bond between two souls who find each other against all odds, family is the anchor that keeps us grounded. It's a reminder that we are never truly alone, even in our darkest moments, if we allow ourselves to lean on those who care for us. To the audience reading this story, let it be a call to action. To look beyond appearances, to extend a hand to those in need, and to cherish the relationships that give life meaning. Let it inspire you to seek out the hidden stories behind the faces you pass every day, to listen without judgment, and to act with compassion. Because in doing so, you might just discover that the most profound connections often arise from the simplest gestures: a kind word, a helping hand, or a moment of understanding. Alexander and Elena's journey may have begun in an unlikely place, but it blossomed into something extraordinary. Their love reminds us that no matter where we come from or what challenges we face, we all deserve to be seen, valued, and loved. And perhaps, in embracing that belief, we can create ripples of change that extend far beyond ourselves.